Hey folks, I don't want to blow your mind or nothing, but I think that the classic Fallout games are pretty darn good. While their quality can arguably sometimes be exaggerated by nostalgia goggles, I don't really think very many games manage to capture the crushing, complicated atmosphere of 1997's Fallout, and I'm very much including Fallout 2 when I say that. Partly because I was new to the game's system mechanics, and partly because it's a fairly understated introduction, I didn't find myself entirely convinced by Fallout's earliest gameplay. Fighting the rats outside Vault 13 wasn't particularly difficult, it was just kind of boring. Though it did raise the question, what the hell happened to Ed? My question is, did they send him out with like 1 HP, or did he just suffer the world's craziest string of critical misses? Or did like the Overseer have something to do with this? I would like justice for Ed. Either way, Fallout didn't immediately grab me. That part is very much true, but by the time I was checking out Vault 15 in a futile attempt to find the water chip, I was pretty much hooked. Nearly every moment of classic Fallout is at least a little bit stressful, whether you're worrying about the time limit or desperately hoping that the random encounter system will take mercy on you, fighting your first deathclaw, or finding out for the first time whether this new community you're interacting with is hostile. Fallout's pretty relentless, kind of all the time. Even in the late game with hardened power armor, you're still at kind of constant risk of being taken out by some unlucky critical hit, so any combat encounter with even a remotely similarly leveled enemy is one that you need to approach with some level of caution. And I think that's something that like modern Fallout has not really managed to capture, and I'm including New Vegas when I say that. I think that a Fallout 1 remake has the potential to inject that level of challenge and melancholy into the modern fan base without compromising a lot of the mechanics that Bethesda has clearly attached themselves to, and get new fans who otherwise would have been confused by several aspects of 90s CRPGs interested in stories that I do think deserve to be told and retold almost 30 years later. But as the name might suggest, a remake of classic Fallout does include some remaking. This video is going to cover a few changes that I think might be worth adding, both to improve on a few small issues with the original game and build on what is there to provide an experience that is interesting to new and returning players alike. As with all of my videos like this, please remember that I'm not trying to outsmart the developers or trash talk any of the involved artists. These are just some ideas that I have had that I think might be worth implementing. You are free to hate them, you're free to think they're stupid. I'm not really going to be going into things that I expect that the developers would do unless I already agree with them. For instance, I think it's almost certainly the case that a Fallout remake would make children invincible and or just remove them from the game. I don't personally like that idea, so I'm not going to list it as one of the possible changes. Several of these suggested changes will result in optional changes to the story of Fallout 1. I don't think that any of these changes should actually alter the canon ending in any way. While I think you should have the option to leave Dogmeat outside the military base so he doesn't get eviscerated by a laser wall, it can still be true that something to that effect happened in the canon ending. Without further ado, the first set of changes that should probably be made to any Fallout 1 remake are the mechanical changes made by Fallout 2. Go figure. Things like players' options for controlling or trading with their companions in 1 are extremely limited and require the player to use the steal mechanic if they ever want to get their items back. I mean, in general, a lot of Fallout's age is shown in its menu systems, so updating them in these like minor ways and probably overhauling the rest to be a bit more intuitive would arguably make these games already feel like 10 years younger without doing anything else. Honestly, making party size contingent on charisma like it is in 2 is probably also a good idea, just because it forces the player to think a little bit more about who they want in their party and or dump a bunch of extra points in charisma so they don't have to think about it. Much like Fallout 2, I think a Fallout 1 remake should allow players to give their companions new suits of armor, but unlike Fallout 2, I actually think that armor should be visible on the companion's sprite, because I don't know about you, but I was really disappointed when I gave Cassidy his first suit of power armor only for him to look completely identical to his base appearance. By all means, feel free to hide companion armor if you want, but I would like to see it. Something else I'd like to see at all times is my goddamn character. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about what the player's point of view should be in a classic Fallout remake, and I'm here to give you my objectively correct, unassailable position that the classic Fallouts should remain trimetric as they have been since time immemorial. I do like the idea of visiting early Fallout locations in 3D, but I don't think that a remake is the place to do that. Way too much of Fallout's DNA is built around the way that we view our character, from like the turn-based combat to the utterly massive world map. Like a 3D Fallout remake could work, but I think it would be abandoning something special in order to feel a little bit more modern. I mean, updating a game to feel newer is all well and good. Clearly, it's something that I support to a certain extent, but only to a certain extent. At the end of the day, I would want a remake to feel like Fallout, just a bit smoother and a bit more open, not like a completely brand new game that just happens to share the same story as Fallout. But since I did mention I'd like to visit some of classic Fallout's locations in 3D, should probably clarify what I mean. If it were up to me, a future game in the series would visit some of these locations in DLC. Depending on the time period that the game is set in, I think that Necropolis, the Glow, the Cathedral, the military base would all be cool locations from Fallout 1 for DLC to explore. And if you're wondering why Vault 13 wasn't on my list there, it's because I'd much prefer the Fallout 2 version because I want my fucking talking deathclaws back, damn it. Moving on to more substantive issues, however, I think that Fallout 1 is lacking in certain roleplay areas that a remake could potentially touch on in a bit more depth. The first of these is the time limit. What I would assume to be the most controversial mechanic in Fallout 1 is the relatively lax time limit placed on the character to find Vault 13 a water chip before the vault runs out of water and dies. And a lot of people just dislike this mechanic because it forces the player to work towards a goal that might not be their top priority, and it kind of prevents exploration because players are constantly worried that they're going to just like induce a fail state if they dick around for too long. I will say the option to add an extra 100 days via the water merchants was a very good idea, and it allows a lot more flexibility and generally increases player choice. But I'm of the personal opinion that failing to obtain the water chip shouldn't fail the game at all. Saving the vault is our first major goal, yeah, but why am I not allowed to play an evil or apathetic character who leaves home for the first time and never looks back? If I were in charge, I'd make Vault 13 a useful source of important resources and like skilled technicians that are only available after you return the water chip. That way, saving the vault is helpful in the end game, helps you to deal with the Master and the super mutant army, but it's possible to end the game without them. Seriously, you should just leave the time limit exactly as it is, but allow the player to keep playing after it elapses. In this version of the game, I would probably make storming the military base quite a bit more difficult, that either requires significantly greater preparation than it already does, or extra assistance. For instance, if the player enlists the help of the Brotherhood of Steel, they would actually help you assault the base instead of dicking around outside after they took out the guards like their entire job is already done. If the player actually saved the vault, they'd have access to improved weapon upgrades and or stronger medical supplies, maybe a second power armor modification from some enterprising vault resident, something like that. Hopefully that would help to make the player feel like some of those choices are a little bit more useful before they actually get to the end slides. To further expand on this idea, I would love if there were a way of properly playing out the super mutant side of the game. I know that this is venturing further into fanfiction territory, but like, wouldn't it be nice if the player could be dipped in the FEV vats as early as Necropolis, if memory serves, and then be tasked with fulfilling the mission of the Unity? I can't exactly say what that questline might look like, but presumably it would start with rounding up the Vault 13 residents and adding them to the army. I like that we have the option to become super mutants in Fallout 1, but there's no way to actually play in that state. Every means of joining the Master ends the game right there, and at least to me, kind of reduces the impact of joining them. And I get it, maybe this is stupid wishful thinking, but I think in this particular case, a remake that adds an entirely new dimension to the game without taking away from the existing story would be extremely cool. And look, if people see this video, this is the part that they're gonna make fun of me for. And to those people, I say, look behind you. No, not there. Yeah, a little bit closer. Something's off, isn't it? Like the tiniest bit of distortion in the air. Don't worry. I'm not gonna do anything. Yet. If you'd like to get me off your back, you have precisely one option. Go down to the description and check out the first couple chapters of my novel, The Empath. People seem to like what they've seen so far, so I would consider checking that out if you like post-apocalyptic sci-fi, which I'm guessing you might. Fallout 1 should have a car. Yeah, I said it. Fallout 2 had a car, and it was so goddamn helpful for navigating the wasteland. I recently saw Tim Kaine, who, if you weren't aware, was Hillary Clinton's running mate in the 2016 election, tweeting about how voting rights are under threat in the United States, which is true. Good point, Tim. Unrelated, I also saw Tim Kaine, who, if you weren't aware, was the project lead on Fallout 1, talking about how he thought it was strange that Fallout 2 included a highwayman as its vehicle of choice rather than the more distinctly Fallout-y Corvega. I would show you a clip if I could, but unfortunately I spent all of my effort looking up a former vice presidential candidate's Twitter account, so I'm pretty much spent now. As penance, I have linked Tim's YouTube channel in the description. If you're interested in playing games, designing games, or dividing real human beings into heroes and villains, I heavily recommend checking it out. His videos are pretty cool, and I've learned quite a bit from them. Back on topic, I think that Fallout 1, particularly in this hypothetical, has plenty of room for a vehicle to become available to the player sometime before they would realistically obtain the water chip. In its initial form, the Corvega wouldn't be in the best of shape, realistically only increasing the player's map navigation speed by about 25 to maybe 40%, which would at least help out a player who's worried about getting the water chip back in time, but wouldn't make them completely overpowered. Throughout the game, upgrades would become available to bring it to about the general quality level of its Fallout 2 counterpart, although probably slightly slower, just given that Fallout 1 has a smaller map. That said, I do think that the map should become at least a little bit bigger, not in the sense that it needs to expand outwards, but that I'd like to see a couple more small locations become available to the player. Fallout 2 had this great mechanic where smaller, less important locations could be found by either talking to a player who knew about them or by finding directions to the location, after which point the location would actually become marked on the player's map. Fallout 1 could benefit from locations like the Deathclaw cave becoming permanently available after it's discovered, but also by adding a couple smaller new locations that could be found by asking around. Perhaps one such location could be found if the player sides with Gizmo during the Junktown side quest, where the player's taken to a stash of contraband held somewhere outside of town. Another location might be found by talking to the followers of the apocalypse, maybe leading you to a tiny encampment in dire need of medical supplies for which they would trade an engine upgrade for the Corvega. A few locations dotted around the map like this could breathe a little bit more life into exploration without fundamentally changing the core locations of the game. And if I were a Bethesda executive right now, I'd probably be losing my mind thinking about how this gives us the opportunity to add the triple vault from the Fallout show as an optional location. Todd, if you're watching, I give you permission to do that, but only if it's an Easter egg and can't be interacted with, okay? I can't say that it's a completely stupid idea, because clearly I came up with it as well, but you need to show restraint. Okie dokie, what else? Obviously, any Fallout remake would suck ass if it didn't include my Talking Deathclaw OC, but other than that, those are my ideas for now. I'm sure y'all could give plenty of feedback, so I would love to hear what your thoughts might be in the comments. I guess that this is sort of a recurring series now, talking about how I would change or alter a piece of media. I hope that it comes across in the right way. I'm talking about this stuff because I like it a lot, and liking things tends to make me think about how I might put my own spin on them. Please don't take it too seriously, but do feel free to share your own ideas. I have a few more of these sorts of videos planned, although not directly Fallout related, but no promises on when they'll be out. Please do consider taking a look at the Empath down below, and feel free to give me your thoughts on that as well. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Please click the like button to give me the dopamine, and the subscribe button to also give me the dopamine, and always remember to have a Fallout New Vegas day.